How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Chav Beis, Daf 22 of Masechta BavaKama. Friends, yo friends. Chaver, today's a gewaldige Gemara. It might be a little slow. It's not an easy Gemara. It's not Yavamis. It's. You see, the thing with BavaKama is what I think is okay about BavaKama is like these pages are big. These pages are slow. Like they've been taking a long time and stuff, but they're like conceptual. They're slow because it's like you're trying to understand things. You know, is it like this or is it like that? Or you're trying to get down to the bottom of things and asking questions. Like you really have to grapple with concepts in BavaKama. It goes slowly because of conceptually. But then, of course, Yavamis, on the other hand, is just going to drive you crazy. So I think that's the thing with BavaKama. Everything is always, it's the Yavamis litmus test. Is it Yavamis? That's what but it's not Yavamis. Or like, this is Yavamis. I don't want, Yavamis is the litmus test. Yavamis is the litmus test. So BavaKama, things aren't easy. Bichlal, they're not easy. But you work through them on a conceptual level. Okay, enough stalling. I really do need to jump into this daf. It's not the easiest daf, but again, it's a good daf. It's a conceptual daf. Now that I've got everybody very, very excited about the concepts, let's delve in. Hakelev shenotel. So we're at the scenario of the hunt. A dog is a hunt. We're at the scenario of a hunt that took a biscuit, and the biscuit was cooking on coals, and the hunt took the biscuit, and there was a coal on the biscuit, and he takes the biscuit over to some place to eat it. It's right next to a pile. Well, the shaila is exactly what exactly is the mitzias. But there's a biscuit, there's a coal. He eats the hunt eats the biscuit, and then the pile gets lit on fire, and so the Mishnah had said that for the biscuit, the owner of the dog, we'll call him Ruvain. Ruvain owns the dog, so Ruvain is going to have to pay nezek shalim for the biscuit, but for the pile, or seemingly the pile, it's going to be chatzi nezek. So here we go. So now says the Gemara, Itmar Rabbi Yechanan Amar Isho Mishum Chitzav. This is the big conceptual machlokas of today's daf. Now Rabbi Yochanan says that we treat a fire as an arrow. We treat a fire as an arrow, and Rish Lakish says we treat an arrow as your money. What does that mean? It means that, well, conceptually, a fire you kind of light in one place, and then it goes and spreads to another place, right? So kind of like an arrow, you shoot it in one place and then it goes to some other place. So Rabbi Yochanan says that Isho Kechitzav, that his fire is like an arrow, that it's, it kind of spreads and has a life, it moves to some other place, it goes to some other place. Rish Lakish says Isho Kimamono, that his flame, his fire is like his money, right? It's no different than than an ox that causes damage, right? Just like a person's ox causes damage in Yischayev, a person's fire causes damage in Yischayev. We're going to see the different. Basically, now that we've kind of like established the machlokas, basically the whole daf is going to be understanding different nafkaminis and kashas and all sorts of things, different conceptual things, and we're going to work through it. That's basically how today's daf is going to go. So again, Itmar was stated, Rabbi Yechanan Amar says, Rabbi Yechanan, Isho Mishum Chitzav, that a fellow's flame is like an arrow. Rish Lakish Amar, Isho Mishum Mamono, Rish Lakish says that a fellow's flame is like his money. Now, for Rish Lakish, my time, Lo Amar Rabbi Yechanan. So now, how come Rish Lakish says that a flame is like money, is like his property, and not like an arrow? So Amar Lach, so Rish Lakish will respond, Chitzav mikocho ka'az le'ai lab mikocho ka'azio. So Rish Lakish says, well, there's a big difference between a flame and an arrow. an arrow will go as far as basically you determine it will go, right? I mean, it's your strength, right? You pull back on the bow a little bit, it'll go a little bit. You pull back a lot of it, it'll go a lot of it, right? It's be'etzim your control, right? You're shooting an arrow at a target, like the whole, the trajectory is something that you determine. It's your koach. That's not the way it works with a flame. You light a flame and then it entirely takes a life of its own. As long as it has fuel, it will continue to spread far and wide on its own. It's not your koach. So Rish Lakish says that is a key difference between an arrow and a flame. And therefore, says Rish Lakish, I do not agree with Rabbi Yochanan, and I hold that a flame is not like an arrow. So again, Rish Lakish, my time lo Rabbi Yochanan. How come Rish Lakish does not hold like Rabbi Yochanan? Amar loch, because Rish Lakish will say to you, Chitzav mikocho ka'azle, whereas a arrow is a result, I guess, of his strength, reflection of his strength. It comes from his koach. Hi, lav mikocho ka'azle, which is not the case by a flame. Flame just kind of takes life of its own. Rabbi Yochanan, my time lo Rish Lakish. How come Rabbi Yochanan, who says that it's that isho kechitzav, that it is like an arrow, how come he does not hold like Rish Lakish? How come he does not hold that it's mamono? Amalach, because Rabbi Yochanan responds, mamona is bei mamoshe, always bei mamoshe. That property, right? Your cow, for example, has mamoshes. It has mass. I could touch it. I could work with it. Mashen came with fire. Fire is you can't pick it up. You can't just pick up a flame. It's like you could you could slide your hand right through a flame. Like it doesn't have, I don't know exactly what the scientific way to describe it is, but it doesn't have mamoshes. I guess that would be the more yeshivish way to describe it. A flame doesn't have mamoshes. Does that work to satisfy the Babylon Talmud definition requirements? A cow has mamoshes. A flame does not have mamoshes. It's not. Okay, so be'etzim that is the machlokas between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan says isho mishum chitzav, and Rish Lakish says isho mishum mamono. Let's go weiter. Tanan. We learn in our Mishnah. Hakelev shenoto chule. So a hunt took a biscuit. Okay, and he eats the biscuit, lights the pile on fire for the biscuit. It's nezek shalim for the fire on the pile. It's chatzi nezek. So bishlam lamanda amar isho mishum chitzav. So I understand Rabbi Yechanan's position that isho mishum chitzav, that it's like an arrow. Chitzav dekelev hu da 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 da. So assuming that the scenario is like this, Shimon is making biscuits. Ruvain's hunt goes and steals a biscuit. Connected to the biscuit was a coal. The hunt goes and sits down next to this pile to eat the biscuit. The hunt eats the biscuit. The coal ignites the pile. The pile then lights on fire. And we're saying that Ruvain needs to pay Shimon completely, right? Nezek shalim for the biscuit that the dog ate. Also, by the way, this all, of course, has to be in Shimon's Rishus, right? Because it's Shane is Rishus HaNizak, not Rishus HaRab. So Ruvain needs to pay Shimon for the biscuit, that's Shane, Nezek Shalim. But then the coal lit the pile on fire, and we said, so the dog, Be'etzim, the hunt, lit the pile on fire. So it's the arrow, so to speak, of the hunt, which is Be'etzim Tzroris. So when it comes to tzroris by a person, right? Adam muad la'olam. A person is always going to be nezek shalom. There's no concept of chatzi nezek tzroris by a person, but there is a concept, as we've learned, a concept of chatzi nezek tzroris for an animal, for an ox, in this case a hunt. So in this case, the hunt lit the pile on fire. So it's the chetz, it's the arrow, if you will, of the hunt, which is be'etzim tzroris, and chatzi nezek tzroris is chatzi nezek. So that I can understand, therefore, why it would be nezek shalim for the biscuit and chatzi nezek for the pile, because it's be'etzim chatzi nezek tzroris. So that's if you say that isho mishum chitzav. Omar Isha Mishum Mamono. But if you say, Dag nabbit. Okay, I think that this shouldn't be why does that happen? If my phone is on airplane mode, I feel like I shouldn't be getting notifications. Drives me nuts, because then I always think that it messes with the recording. You know what? I could probably just turn off notifications for Google Calendar. That's probably a good idea. But if you say that Isho Mishum Bamono, that it's be'etzim like his that your flame is like your money, well then whose flame is it? It's not Ruvain's flame, it's Shimon's flame. So it's Shimon's flame, right? It's Shimon's coal, right? Ruvain's hunt took a biscuit with a coal from Shimon's barbecue. So it's Shimon's flame. It's not Ruvain's. Why should Ruvain have to pay? Right? So again, right? So if you say that fire is be'etzim like your money, so whose fire is it? Not Ruvain's, it's Shimon's fire. So Ha'esh lav mamona de bal kelevu. The flame doesn't belong to the owner of the hunt, doesn't belong to Ruvain. So why should Ruvain have to pay chatzi nezek? So Amalek Rish Lakish will respond, and here what are we talking about? Here, what's the case? So the case is not, according to Rish Lakish, the case is not like we described it. Rather, the Ajay Aduye, it's talking about where the hunt, so the hunt took the biscuit, there was no coal attached to the biscuit, so the hunt took the biscuit, okay, and ate the biscuit, so Yischayev nezek shalim for the biscuit, and then the hunt threw the coal, and it landed next to the pile, and it ultimately lit the pile on fire. So the al-charare mishalim nezek shalim. So for eating the biscuit, Ruvain is chayiv nezek shalim. Now the al-makom gacheles mishalim chatzi nezek. The al-godish kula potter. Do you hear that, friends? Do you hear me? Do you need me to explain this to you? I imagine that you do. So the hunt threw the coal. The place where the coal lands, so the hunt basically damaged that place. So now either you can visualize it as chatzi nezek tzroris, right? That the hunt threw the coal, so it's like tzroris, and therefore it's your chayv chatzi nezek where it lands and caused damage where the coal landed. Chatzi nezek tzroris. Alternatively, it's mishuna. It's strange for the hunt to throw a coal, so therefore it's chatzi nezek, of that. But because it's mishuna. But be'etzim, what he's chayv chatzi nezek for, according to Rish Lakish, is just the place where the thrown coal lands. And then when the coal ignites the pile, well, Isho Mishum Mamona, right? That's the fire is Shimon's, and so Reuven's not chayiv to pay him for that. So again, so let's read that again. So Amalek Rish Lakish will say to you, Achab Ma'askinon, what are we talking about over here? The Aduye, the hunt threw the coal. The Al Charar Mishalim Nezek Shalim, that on the biscuit that the hunt ate. So Reuven is chayiv Nezek Shalim. Va'amakom gacheles, on the place where the coal landed, Mishalim Nezek Shalim, Reuven has to pay nezek shalim because it caused damage in that place. But val godish kula, but then on the rest of the pile that got caught on fire from the coal, isho mishum mamono, belongs to Shimon, and therefore Potter Reuven doesn't have to pay anything. Rabbi Yochanan, who says that for the biscuit Reuven pays full nezek, and for the pile Reuven pays chatzi nezek, well, because isho mishum chitzo, well, he holds, like we initially explained, the ancha anuche, that the coal was attached to the biscuit, and therefore the hunt took the biscuit and put it down, and then ate the biscuit, and then the coal lit the pile on fire, which is betzim the tzroros of the kelev. So then al charare ve'al makom gacheles mishalim nezek shalim. So Rabbi Yochanan would say that for the biscuit and for the place where the coal was put down and caused damage that way, he's responsible for nezek shalim. Val hagadish But for the Godish, for the fact that the fire spread like an arrow, then it's Troros of the Kelev, and Mishalim Chatzi Nezek, he pays half damages for that. Wow. I told you, Cheve, it's a Givaldig Adaf. It's not like super hard, right? But it's conceptual. You got to think it. You got to use your noggin. Take out your brain. Toshma, come in here. Gomel, Tone Pishton. Oh, this is Givaldig, Cheve. Why is this Givaldig? Because, what's today's date? I don't know, it's probably so for me, it's probably Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So, Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Dalet. So it's Dalet Kislev. Which means when you're all going to listen to it, I reckon it'll probably be, I don't know, maybe the 11th of Kislev. Be'etz, so 2 weeks before Chanukah. Be'etzim, this is one of the few, I think, Chanukah Gemara, as a Taka comes up, Masechta Shabbos in my Chanukah. Or at least in that parak, Bom Madlikin. So it mentions Chanukah. So apropos. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, no. Tashma, come here. Gomel Ton Pishton. So a camel that so a camel has some flax on it. V'over b'shus harabim, and it's walking in Rishus harabim, and it's got flax loaded on it, and the flax is sticking out on either side of the camel. Nichniso pishtano l'soch achonus. If the flax got into one of the stores over there, vidalku b'neiro shel chenvani, and the flax lit on fire because the store owner, the shopkeeper, had a fire in his store, and then the flax of the camel ignited. V'hidlik is abir, and lit the whole building on fire. Bal gomel chayev, so the owner of the camel is going to be chayev to pay for the building. Hiniach chenvani neiro mibachutz. But if the shopkeeper left his candle outside and the flax got ignited from it, chenvani chayev, well then the shopkeeper is going to be chayev. Rabbi Yehuda Omer b'nei Chanukah potter. Rabbi Yehuda says, but if it was ner Chanukah and he had it outside for Pesumei Nisa, that's a different story, and the chenvani would be potter. Fine. So I understand if you say that your fire is Isha Mishum Chitzav. So in this case, the camel owner's camel lit, Be'etzem got the stuff caught on fire, and the camel owner is responsible for that. So Chitzav de Gamalhu, it's Be'etzem the Chetz, it's the arrow of the camel, and the owner of the camel needs to pay. But if you say Isha Mishum Mamono, so whose flame is that? It's the shopkeeper's flame. Why should the camel owner be chayiv to pay if it's the shopkeeper's flame? The fire does not belong to the camel owner, it belongs to the shopkeeper. Why should the camel owner be chayiv? Rish Lakish will respond, what are we talking about? Well, you're right, but in this particular case, you know what happened? The camel, after igniting the flax, it started running all over the place, lighting the whole place on fire. So it was Pasha damaging the entire place by lighting it on fire, but it's not like it was like a fire that spread. Like the camel it was responsible for all the damage, and therefore the camel owner is responsible to pay. If that's the case, Ema Seifa, if we go right in the Brisa, it says, that if the shopkeeper left his candle outside, chenvani chayev, then the shopkeeper is owner. But v'b'misachseches amai chayev. But if we're talking about where the camel is running around, damaging everything in sight or damaging the whole building, so why should the shopkeeper be chayev? Ultimately, it's the camel that's causing all the damage. Bisha omda. It's talking about where the camel was standing put. So it wasn't, messing everything around. But omda v'sichsecha kol sheken dechenvani potter ubal gomel chayev. But once again, if it's just standing there and like moving things around and causing damage, well then certainly the owner of the camel should be chayev for that, because he should have moved the camel away. Well, it's talking about where the camel stopped because it was taking a pish. So therefore, the owner of the camel couldn't move it, and the whole thing caught on fire. It's the shopkeeper's fault because his candle was outside. So Reisha Bal Gomel Chayiv. So in the Reisha, it is the owner of the camel who is Chayiv lo iboyle la'afushe b'tina, because he should not have put on so much flax on that camel that it caused this situation. A Seifa Chenvani Chayiv, and in the Seifa it is the shopkeeper who is liable to lo iboyle lanuche nero me'avroi, because he should not have put his candle outside in the Rishus Harabim. Toshma, come in here. Hamadlik es agodish v'hayagdi kafus lo ve'eved samuch lo v'nisraf imo chayev eved kafus lo v'gdi samuch lo v'nisraf imo potter. Who can tell me what this means? There is a pile of stuff, I don't know, sticks, pile of stuff, and tied to the pile is a goat. And there's also an eved right next to the pile, but the eved is not tied to the pile. A guy lights the pile on fire, the goat gets cooked to death, and the eved should have run away, but he didn't, and he died. So he's not chayiv for the eved should have run away, but he is going to be chayiv to pay for the pile and for the goat. Now if it was fakert, if the eved was tied to the pile and the goat was not, so in that case he's not going to be chayiv to pay at all, because since the eved was tied to the pile and he lit the pile / eved on fire, he's chayiv for murder, and it's kamle b'derab mineh. Since he's chayiv for murder, he's not going to be chayiv to pay for the pile, and we say also he wouldn't be chayiv to pay for the goat either. Now let's read that again. So Tashma, come in here. Hamadlik es agodish, if somebody lights a pile on fire, vayagdi kafus lo, and there was a goat tied to the pile, and the goat couldn't escape, the eved samuch lo, and there was an eved near the pile, and the eved should have run away. V'nisraf imo, and I guess everything got all burnt up, the eved, the goat, the pile. Chayev, so he doesn't pay for the eved, because the eved should have run away, but he needs to pay for the pile and for the goat. Eved kafus lo v'gedi samuch lo, if the eved was tied to the pile and the goat was near it, v'nisraf imo, and everything got burnt, potter, so he's going to be chayev misa for killing the eved, but he's going to be potter for the goat and the pile, because of kamle b'derab mineh, which means that we apply the more stringent punishment, and since he's chayev misa, so we don't, he doesn't also have to, start paying money. He's got capital punishment. That is what he's going to be punished with. He doesn't have to pay the other people back. Bishlam l'manda amr isho mishum chitzav. So I understand if you say isho mishum chitzav, that your fire is like your arrows. So yeah, I understand why we say kam le b'derab, right? In the second case, when he lights the pile on fire and the eved who is tied to the fire dies, so we say that the person who lit the pile on fire is chayiv, because he basically, it's as if he would have shot the eved to death with an arrow. He's chayiv, and therefore he's chayiv misa, and kam le b'derab mineh is potter for the goat and for the pile. Mishumachi potter. That's why he's potter for the goat and for the pile, because of kam le b'derab mineh. Ella mishum mamono. But if you say that a flame is like your property, so basically the damage that was caused by your flame is basically the equivalent of the damage that would be caused by your ox. Now, what's the halacha if a fellow's ox kills an eved? You're not chayiv misa for that. You have to pay 30 shekels. But you're not chayiv misa, so shouldn't I also be chayiv for the pile and for the goat? So am I potter? Why are you potter for, if you say isho mishum mamono, why are you potter for the pile and for the goat? Ilu kato tore avda, if his ox would have killed the eved, hochinami delo michayiv, would you say that you're not chayiv for those other things? Of course not. If your ox killed this eved, you'd be chayiv to pay 30 shekels for the eved, and you'd also be chayiv to pay for the goat and for the pile. So Amalach Reb Shimon ben Lakish says, Reb Shimon ben Lakish achav ma'askinon. Here what are we talking about? Shehetzis begufo shel eved. Well, in this particular case of fire, it's talking about where the person mamish it's not like a fire that spread and killed this Eved. He mamish like torched the Eved to death. He murdered the Eved. So that is not Mishum Mamono, he's just a murderer. Right? It's not like his ox killed the Eved. No, he killed the Eved. The Kamle B'Derab Minei, and therefore we do have Kamle B'Derab Minei, and you're Chayev Misa for, torching the Eved, but you'll be Potter for the pile and for the goat. If that's the case, Ma'ile Meimer. Well, then what's the Chiddush? Obviously we say Kamle B'Derab Minei. He murdered an Eved. Yeah, he's going to be Chayev Misa for that. He's going to be Potter for paying for the other things. So Tzricha B'Gdi Dechad Ve'Eved Dechad. Well, the Chiddush, here's the Chiddush, friends. The Chiddush is that the Eved belonged to one person and the Gedi belonged to somebody else. So even though he's Chayev, right? So he's Chayev Misa for murdering the Eved who belonged to, one person. I might think that since the Gedi belongs to somebody else, so maybe I'm Chayev Misa for what I did to this guy, maybe I should be Chayev Mammon for what I did for the other guy. Say no, since it's Chayev Misa Bichlal, he doesn't have to pay for the goat, even though it's to a separate party. Alright. Tashma, come in here. We've seen this before, that if, let's just call him Ruvain sends a flame, a fire, with a cherish, a shoita, a ka'in, not a wise thing to do. Potter midine adam v'chayv midine shemaim, and then, sure enough, a big conflagration spreads, right? It causes a big fire, right? Ruvain sent a flame with a cherish of a kohen, and now all of a sudden a fire breaks out, and of course does damages. So we say, look, you're chayav bidinei shamayim, that was extremely irresponsible, and you caused a lot of damage. They're not going to be very, they're going to be upset with you in shamayim, but in legal courts in this world, you're potter because we can't charge you for anything. Okay. So I understand why we can't charge you for anything if you say like Rabbi Yochanan that a flame is like an arrow. Well, whose arrow was it? Wasn't Ruvain's arrow? It was the Cherishot of Kartan's arrow. They're the one who ultimately lit the thing on fire. It's their arrow. So yeah, Ruvain is going to be potter. So chitz of the Cherishu, the arrow was the Cherish's, not Ruvain's. Therefore he's potter b'dinei adam. But if you say that the flame is like his money, well then I don't care that it's the Cheresh who did it, it's his flame. He should be chayiv. We learned on, I think we said Daf Yud, I think Rashi says that, was it Daf Yud? What does Rashi say? Yeah, Daf Yud. That if a fellow sends his ox with a cherishot of a kohen, he would be chayav. So here also, if Ruvain sends this flame with the cherishot of a kohen, if you say isho mishum mamono, so then sending a flame with a cherishot of a kohen is no different than sending an ox with a cherishot of a kohen. So you should be chayav. Why are we saying potter b'dinei shamayim b'dinei adam? So ha'itmar Allah. So we talked about it. Amar Rish Lakish, says Rish Lakish, Mishmei Dechizkiya, Lo Shanu Ela, Kishemasar Lo, Gacheles V'liba. That when we say that, right, that he's potter when he sends a coal with the Cherishot of a kohen. Because in that case, the coal is kind of like, coals are going out, right? If you leave it alone, it'll just kind of go out. The Cherishot of a kohen then reversed that by fanning it and made it into a whole fire. So Rish Lakish explains that when we talk about being potter, when Reuven sends the flame with the Cherishot of a kohen, he's talking about a coal that was on its way out, and then the Cherishot of a kohen, fanned it. In that case, he would be potter. Aval Masalo shall heves. But if Reuven sent an actual flame with the cherishot of a kohen, which is basically the equivalent of sending an ox with the cherishot of a kohen, meaning in both cases it's like ready to damage, right? As opposed to the coal, which is like on its way out, an actual flame is like an ox. Both are kind of ready to do damage, and it's irresponsible to send it with the cherishot of a kohen. So then chayav, you would be chayav in both cases, right? Both by the ox as well as by the flame in that case. My time outcome bari azeka, because in both cases, both by the flame and by the ox would be bari azeka, and you'd be chayiv in both cases. Fine. Rabbi Yochanan Amar afilu shalev es potter. Whereas Rabbi Yochanan says that even if you send the flame, ultimately Ruvain is going to be potter because kasavar tzavsa the cheresh kagarim, because ultimately it is the cheresh who is lighting the thing on fire, and it's his arrows, and therefore Ruvain is potter. Lo mechayev ad demasule gavza silta v'shraga. Ruvain would only be chayev if he gave him like a flame and some wood to start it with. Then that would be like super irresponsible, and then he would be chayiv. But short of that, he would be potter. Okay. On my Ravid, says Ravid, that there is a verse as well as a brisa that support Rabbi Yochanan's assertion that Isha mishum chitzav. Kra. The verse is the pasuk says kiseitze eish, that if a flame goes out, right? The pasuk says, right? What does the pasuk say? Kiseitze eish umitzah kotzev v'nechal gadish or akama or asada shalom amaver sabeir. If a flame gets out, so then the arsonist, I guess maybe you could say, needs to pay. I don't know if that's the right word, but the person who makes the flame needs to pay. So kiseitze eish, when an eish goes out on its own, like an arrow, it spreads. So teitze me'atzma goes out on its own. Shalom yishalom amaver sabeir, and we say, right? The igniter of the fire needs to pay. So we see that a flame is like an arrow. Shmamina isha mishum chitzav. So we see a flame is like an arrow masnisa, and the brisa is the Tanya has one of the brisa that same pasuk, it's basically the same thing as we just said. That pasuk, pasach akasuv benizke mamono. First it talks about his property, that it kind of goes out on its own. V'sim benizke gufo. But then it talks about how he himself made the flame. Lo malach isha mishum chitzav, to say to you that the flame that kind of spreads on its own like an arrow is he's going to be chayiv for that because isha mishum chitzav. All my Rav says, Rav kasha leila Abaye. Abaye asked the following question: L'man damar isha mishum chitzav tamun be'esh depater achmano heichi mishkachas lo. So friends, as I got up to this part of the Gemara, my chaver Elchanan Klingman came over. I was learning this part of the Gemara, and I hear from outside, I hear a stroll. I was like, oh, Elchanan. So I opened the door, and there he was, and he came in, and I told him we have to finish the sugya. So we finished the sugya. So Abaye asks a gewaldige kasha. He asks the following gewaldige kasha. Oh, there's a halacha. It's come up before, I believe. That, it's definitely come up before. That if a flame burns like a pile, and in the pile is hidden other stuff, so he's potter for the other stuff in the pile. Now here's the thing. If a fellow shoots an arrow, and it hits something that he didn't see, something hidden, he's chayiv for that. That's going to be a problem. On the one hand, when it comes to shooting an arrow, you're chayiv for the potter stuff. You're chayiv for the hidden stuff, and when it comes to a pile, you're going to be what? I don't know what I just said. I got distracted about something. That when it comes to an arrow, you're going to be chayiv for the hidden stuff. Yet when it comes to a fire burning a pile, you're going to be potter for the hidden stuff. But if we say that fire is like an arrow, then it should be the same halacha as an arrow, which is that you should be chayiv for the hidden stuff. So again, Amar Rava says, Rava kasha leila Abaye. Abaye had the following question: if you say that a flame is like an arrow, well then tamun ba'esh depater achmana. That when the Torah says that something hidden in a pile and gets burnt is potter, heichi mishkachas lo, how could it be potter? Because if you say that a flame is like an arrow, it should be chayiv. V'nichalei, and Abaye answered, Kigon shenafla dleika la'oso chatzer. Well, for example, if there was a fire in that, like in a certain courtyard, and the courtyard was closed, and therefore the fire was be'etzim contained. So in that case, it's like the arrows are not traveling anywhere. There's no more arrows. So if there's no law, it's no longer going to be okay. Now let's go weiter. V'nafla gadar, but then the fence falls down. Shalom achmaz deleka, unconnected to the fire. It just falls down on its own. V'halcha v'dlika v'zika b'chatzer acheres, and then it travels some other place and causes damage. So in that case, it's nothing to do with arrows anymore, because when you lit the fire, it was contained, and the metaphorical arrows weren't going to be going anywhere. Then the fence fell down, the fire spread and went somewhere else. So in that case, he's going to be potter for the stuff that is hidden in the pile, because it's no longer like an arrow anymore. There's no more arrows anymore. If that's the case, linin galu nami kalu lechitzav. But if that's the case, then yeah, you shouldn't be chayiv for the stuff that's hidden, but you also shouldn't be chayiv for the stuff that's not hidden either. Shouldn't be chayiv for anything, right? I mean, if we're saying that what happened was the fire was contained, but then the fence fell down and it traveled, and I guess it was an onus, was whatever it is, in that case, you're not going to be chayiv anymore for the hidden stuff, but you shouldn't be chayiv for any of the stuff. So el laman de islay mishum chitzav islay nami mishum mamono. Interesting. So rather, this is a big deal. It's a big line. Rabbi Yochanan, who says isha mishum chitzav, he actually holds both. Or let's say it's fakert. If you're a Lakish and you say isha mishum mamono, you only say isha mishum mamono. But if you say isha mishum chitzav, it's in addition to isha mishum mamono, which means therefore that even in a scenario such as the scenario that we just gave, that the fire was contained in the chutzner, and therefore at the time that you made the fire, the arrows were contained. But then the fence fell down and the fire spread, and therefore it has nothing to do with arrows anymore. But Rabbi Yochanan would still hold isha mishum mamono though. And when the fire spreads and burns down this pile, so then still the halachas that would apply, like Rish Lakish learns, right? The halachas that would apply for isha mishum mamono would apply even though isha mishum chitzav, the arrows are no longer relevant, but isha mishum mamono is still relevant, and you're going to be chayiv to pay for the exposed stuff, but not for the hidden stuff. And for example, if he had an opportunity to have been able to fix the fence, but he didn't, that in that case, shoro hu v'lotafach ba'ape. Then at that point, it basically becomes the equivalent of if a fellow has an ox and he brings the ox into the barn, but then he doesn't close the door. He was negligent. He didn't close the door. The ox went out and damaged. He's going to be chayiv. So here also, if he had an opportunity to have fixed the fence, but he neglected the opportunity, he didn't fix it, and then it went and spread and it caused damage, he's going to be chayiv, but he's only going to be chayiv for the visible stuff of the pile, not the hidden stuff in the pile. So now if you say that Rabbi Yochanan, who holds of isha mishum chitzav, at the end of the day also holds isha mishum mamono, so what's the nafkamina? The difference is l'chayva ba'arba advarim. That, right, arba meaning in addition to nezek, to pay tsar, sheves, ripoy, and boshes. So those additional things are only when a fellow damages another fellow. That's where all those things apply, not if a ox scores a fellow. So if you say isha mishum chitzav, like Rabbi Yochanan, well then, it's a person shooting an arrow, he's going to be chayiv for, these additional 4 things. But if you say isha mishum mamono, well then it's like your ox scoring and you're not going to be chayiv for those things. That's the difference. Chevra, that was the Chav Beis of Masechta BavaKama. Of course, I hope you enjoyed. Today, the big sugya of today was isha mishum chitzav or isha mishum mamono. Rabbi Yochanan says isha mishum chitzav. Rabbi Shlokish says isha mishum mamono. We said at the end of the day, Rabbi Yochanan Oichit agrees that even though he says isha mishum chitzav, that's in addition to isha mishum mamono, and the nafkamina between isha mishum chitzav and isha mishum mamono is l'chayv ba'arba dvarim. Peace out.